I'm Michelle the Painter. Today you're going to be watching a funny old plein air painting that I did. So back in 2017, I took this fabulous trip and did a bunch of plein air painting tutorials overseas, and some of them have not made it to YouTube yet for various reasons. But I was going through the old footage recently and I said, you know what? There's still some good tips in these, even if the painting didn't come out awesome, or like this one, my canvas was not stretched all the way, so it's a wicked wobbly and looks kind of funky when I'm painting, but I still think that there's some good tips in it. So I hope you enjoy watching this fun plein air painting that I did in Italy of some beautiful cypress trees in Tuscany. Enjoy! Hi, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Today I'm in Tuscany, Italy. We're going to be painting this rolling cypress tree hill landscape, and I'm going to be sipping a little Brunello di Montalcino. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so the materials that we're going to need today is a 16 by 20 stretched and primed canvas that you can get at any of your local craft stores, or you can get online, and you can certainly switch up the size, but I'm going to be using a 16 by 20 today. You're going to need a cup of water for washing your brushes. You'll need a paper towel for drying your brushes. I am using a 1-inch wide bristle brush, and I'm also using a number 1 round synthetic brush. I'm using acrylic paints. The colors that I'm using are titanium white, cobalt blue, fire red, burnt sienna, chrome yellow, green oxide, burnt umber, or excuse me, that's raw umber, and Mars black. And that's all you're going to need. You can certainly switch up these colors, but those are the ones I'm going to be using. And the first step that we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a simple sketch of this landscape. So I'm really going to be separating my sky from my hills. And when I'm doing a physical landscape, I like to kind of plan it out. So for me, what I'm doing is I'm going to be going from the right side of the cypress trees, the cluster, to the left side of that single one over there. So I'm going to be looking at the hill and seeing how it is separated and is in ratio to one another. And I see that this one is a little bit lower than the middle one, and it slopes down. So I'm going to start about a quarter of the way up on this side and just kind of mark it. And then I'm going to go across the canvas and come up a little bit here, and that's where I'm going to start this hill over here. So I'm really just kind of making myself an exterior horizon line for the hill. And I'm just kind of watching what I'm doing here. It kind of rolls up a little bit, rolls up even further, and then I see behind those cypress trees, it's starting to come down. And I'm going to come back down to my original. And then I'm just going to kind of tweak it to make sure it's what I want. I think I want this one a little bit taller and a little bit more flat. And then this one maybe come up. And that's the simple sketch I'm doing. So for the next step, we're going to be using your big brush, so you can get that out and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, I'm going to be painting this beautiful sky. I'm going to be using blue and white paint. I'm going to be using my 1-inch wide bristle brush. I am going to get my sky to go darker at the top and lighter as it goes to meet that horizon. And if I'm feeling fancy, I'll put in a couple of clouds, but right now I'm just going to put in my sky. So I'm going to start with blue and white on my brush at the same time. I'm just going to be going left to right up at the top. I'm using a pretty vibrant blue to start. That way I can dull it down if I want to, or I can add some clouds on top of it and it's going to look really nice. But as I go down my sky, I'm going to be picking up more and more white and less blue. So that way my sky will get lighter and lighter as it comes down my canvas. And I'm going to want this to go all the way down to my hill line. So I'm just going to kind of keep going here, watching my beautiful sky up there, using that for inspiration. And again, I'm just going left to right. I'm going to be using, I'm not even picking up any more blue at this point. I'm just picking up my white. And of course, I'm just going left to right. And as I go, I'm thinning out any really thick spots that I have. That way the paint will dry fairly rapidly for me, and I won't, I'll be able to do layers on top of it. So if I wanted to add clouds or anything like that on top of it, it'll dry quick enough for me to do so. So I'm just kind of finishing up here, bringing it all the way down to my hill outline that I've already created. Thinning out any really thick spots I might have. And because I didn't wash my brush throughout this process, I have a very nice gradient that has happened throughout this process, which means it went from dark to light coming down the bottom of it. And I like to paint the edges or the sides of my canvas as I go along. So that way when I'm done with the painting, it'll be nice and finished on the sides and I won't have to put a frame around it. So that's going to complete the first step, or the first painted step. We are going to use this big brush for the next step, but you're going to have to wash and dry the paintbrush. So all that means is just push it down to the bottom of the cup and you spin it around at the bottom, and then you can dry it off on your paper towel and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're going to be using your 1-inch wide bristle brush. The colors that I'm going to be using are burnt sienna, green, brown, yellow, and white. The reason why I'm using that many colors is so I can get a really natural look here. I'm not terribly concerned about getting the rolling hill look to it yet. We'll do that on a second step. What I'm mostly concerned about is just getting a similar color that I see. So I'm going to start with some brown, and I'm just going to kind of get some brown on there. Then I'm going to go into my burnt sienna. I'm going to get some burnt sienna on there. And you can see I'm not really being terribly concerned about where I'm putting these colors. I'm just trying to get them on there right now. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow intermingled there. I do detect some green up there too, so I'll be using a little bit of green. I just really want this to be a nice, earthy, natural color. So that's why I'm getting these colors to intermingle on the canvas together. And I used a good amount on my brush so that way I can still work them as they're drying and they're getting to blend together here. I'm watching my outline that I had with my pencil, so this way I can keep the integrity of my initial sketch that I did. I'm watching my hills. I know that I want them to be a little bit lighter up top, but right now I have not used white yet because the white has a tendency to kind of muddle these colors. I will end up using it, but I want to get these colors on here first. And if you can kind of do that brush stroke in a direction that you feel that the hills are kind of rolling, great. If not, no worries, because we're going to be coming back to them to do a second layer, which is going to add all of that cool texture that you see behind me. So I'm just getting these sides done. And sometimes as you're doing these type of hills, if you can imagine or see where it's a little bit darker in spots, you can project that on the first layer. But as you can see, I'm not terribly concerned. I'm just getting the colors on here. And once I get them on there, now I'm going to start using a touch of my white and start to lighten up a little bit on the tops of those hills, and maybe even start to get the shape of these hills in through here. And all I did was just added just a touch of white onto my canvas here, and I'm just manipulating it to go in the direction of these hills. And because I'm doing this kind of quickly and I'm using a good amount of paint, the paint is staying wet for me, which allows me to keep moving it. And I see that there's this hill coming in through here, so that's kind of where I'm starting this. And I'm going to put just a little bit of white in through here to get this front hill started. And that's going to be the start of these hills. We're going to switch brushes to the small brush after this step, so you can put this big brush away in your water cup and you can get your small brush out and ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, you're going to be using your number 1 round brush. You're going to be using black paint only, and we're going to be painting the tree trunks for the big cypress trees, and we're also going to do 2 markers for the small trees. So I'm going to be using black paint. I'm going to be using my small brush. And one of my tips for making these small brushes nice and pointy is you can spin it in your paint on the side of your palette. So that will help out in creating nice small lines. So I remember from the beginning of when I did my sketch that I had that tree is over on this left side. And I know that it's going to be taller than that little one over there. So I don't want to make it super tall because my tall trees are going to be those cypress trees. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just making myself a little place marker with black paint. And then I'm going to come over to where that little hill is, a little bit to the left of it, and I'm going to make myself a really short one right in through here. So that's going to be that tiny one back there. Now I know that I set this hill in place to be my marker for the cluster of cypress trees there. So all I'm doing here is making a whole bunch of little short lines that are going to be in varying heights from, I'd say, about here to here. So I'll make my first one there and maybe my last one over here. And they're just going to follow this little ridge line that I've made. And I'm not really thinking about it too hard. I do want to make sure that they end up down by this little ridge line. You can have some thicker than others, some more narrow than others, some taller than others, some closer together. You do want, varying widths. You don't want it to look like there's a whole bunch of telephone poles back there with the same width. So just varying heights, varying widths. I think I want a couple of them to be taller than this though. And the reason being is I'm looking over there and I'm seeing sky behind at the bottom of those. So I'm going to make a couple of these a little bit taller. So that way if I do want to see some sky back there, I'll be able to. So you can make a couple of them go higher than that back hill. And that'll allow you the liberty of doing tall ones when you want to. Okay? And then so for the next step, we're going to be using your big brush. So you can put the small brush away in your water cup and you can wash and dry your big brush and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're going to be doing the first layer of the cypress trees. I'm going to be using my large brush. The 3 colors I'm going to be using are black, red, and green. I really want this to be nice and dark, but I also want it to have a really rich, natural color. That's why I'm incorporating the red and the green. The black's probably going to take over predominantly, but the red and the green will add a nice tint to it. This is going to be a dotting technique. So what I do is I'm going to take my bristle brush and I like to squish it in the side of my palette. That gives me control on my bristles. They come together nicely. I'm going to pick up some red and some green also, so I have all three colors on my brush. I want these to be in varying heights. I want some of them to be really tall. I want these to be the star of the show. I do want a couple, ones to go all the way to the ground as well. So I'm going to start with a couple short ones that go all the way down to the ground. And all I'm doing is just dotting. So I've got a couple dotting all the way to the ground. I just want to reload so I can have some fun here. The easiest way for me is to make a whole bunch of tall pointy ones, and then I will start to fill them out and make them a little bit wider. This way I can control that I can see some of those treetops, because they're so tall and skinny, it's really easy to let them get away from you and to make them all look like one big tree. So I am just doing a whole bunch of tall, super skinny ones at the moment, and then that way I can fill in the ones that I want to, but this will allow me to have these varying heights. And you can see I'm not being concerned about what's going on at the bottom yet, because I'm more concerned about getting these pointy tops. Think of them like super tall, skinny pine trees, and you want them to have that pointy top to them. So I've got a good array, I feel, of the points to the tops. So now what I'm going to do is, and again, this is the first layer. There will be another layer later to make them a little bit more defined. But right now, all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be kind of filling in some of these gaps with more dots. So I'm going to bring this one down. Maybe I'll thicken it up just a little bit. Maybe I'll thicken this one up a little bit. And all the while, I'm still in my head saying tall, pointy pine trees. So I don't want to lose my points. If I do, then I can just create new ones. And if you want to have a little bit of that sky poking through, just leave some of it showing. So again, I'm just kind of filling in some of these gaps, but not all of them. I do want these to look a little bit fuller down at the bottom, but again, the second step to this is going to give you that definition around these trees. So I'm really not terribly concerned about the definition to them right now. I'm more concerned about just filling in and getting a good diversity, getting a good amount of tall peaks to it. And I'm almost set here. I want to keep some of the little details that I'm seeing out there. I see that there's kind of a gap in between those ones that I'd like to emulate a little bit. These are nice and close. I think I want some of them a little bit taller and filled in a little bit more. So I'm just kind of watching out there right now and making sure I've got a good full array here. I think I want this one to come out. Maybe even touch that. Maybe another pointy one in through here. And I'm just fiddling at this point, making sure again that I've got some gaps, making sure that I have some really filled in areas, making sure I still have some points to these trees. And I'm just about set here, maybe a little bit more down here. I think I want this one to be a little bit more defined. I might have to step back here to get my own visual reference, make sure I've kind of represented the at least some of this shape well enough in the first layer here. I think I'm feeling like I want them bigger and bushier, so I'm going to fill in some of this center just a little bit more with some black. I do know that when we go to add the details, that's definitely going to fill it in a little bit more, but I want to make sure that I've got a nice full start to this, so I don't run into any kind of issues later. Maybe get these a little bit clumpier up here. It's a little bit better representation in my opinion. It's a lot fuller. Again, I know it's going to be even fuller by the time I add that last layer on it. A fun little tree over there on the right that I'm seeing poking through behind. Same thing with over here. I think I want another little tree. I know there's not one there, but I want one. Just fill in this side a little bit. All right. So I got a little bit of sky showing through there. Got some good gaps up at the top. These again will fill in a little bit better when we do that second layer, but that's all I'm going to do for this layer. Let's hit these two trees before we stop. So just a little tiny touch, give them a little tiny bit of texture. Again, we'll highlight them later. All I'm doing is little tiny dots with the same colors as there. The edge of my brush. All right, and then we're going to wash and dry this brush in preparation for the next step. So just get that done and have a sip, and we'll see you in a minute. Okay, so the next step that we're going to be doing is we're going to finish the ground, except for the shadows. We're going to do the shadows on a future step. We're going to be using the large brush, and we're going to be using the same colors that we started off with, which were burnt sienna, green, yellow, brown, and white. And this time I'm going to try and get more streakies into it. Streakies, that's my professional painting term. To get these little cross hatch marks. It'll be, it's easier to paint it that way too, because you don't have to worry about it getting nice and smooth. And I'm just kind of getting more of a direction of these hills. You can even start to, if you want to, darken in where you see the shadows, just with a little bit more brown. So that will help you later. So what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of seeing where I've got a little bit of darkness going on right now. And then I'm just pulling that up. I see a little bit of darkness over here. So this second coat is just going to really solidify the look of this ground, and it's going to make it look more natural now that you're getting a second coat on. And it will also allow you to add little details like these cross hatch marks if you want to. So I am using a combination of all the colors that I started to. I'm looking out at my landscape and I'm saying, okay, well, this hill seems a little bit more brown and white to me. So I'm going to add the brown and white on top of that green that I had, and this is going to give me a really nice natural kind of look to it. It dips and it goes back up. So I'm going to kind of just utilize different colors on this second, a different color order on this second layer. So that way you'll see the undertones from the first layer that I've done. And it gives a nice effect on it. So I'm still just kind of using brown and white on this side, maybe a little bit of green. I'm seeing some green underneath those trees too. And then I'm just kind of working it down and back up. And you may want to or touch up here. I'm going to touch it up a little bit because I have a little boo-boo that I did earlier. So I'm just kind of closing that gap in through there and watching my hill a little bit, seeing if I can redirect your eye to go down that hill as I'm seeing it up there. So I'm using a little bit of my rust to kind of steer your eye down that hill. And now I'm watching the top of the hill and it kind of rolls over. So again, all I'm doing with this second layer is really steering your eye, or the viewer's eye, into the bends of the hill. So it's going to, even if I don't always have to use the same color, I can keep just kind of using varying colors and shades, and as long as they're natural tones from this hill, which is going to be my greens and my browns and these light white colors, or light color that I'm adding to it, it's going to look really natural. And I'm almost pretty happy with this in through here. Just want to make sure I get all the way down to the bottom of my canvas. I do want a little bit more lightness in through here, just to kind of, again, steer that viewer's eye, going all through here. And you can see I'm just kind of painting over different layers just to give it more texture and more depth to it. I think I want just a little bit more lightness, maybe up and through here. I've got some like hatch marks that I like. I've got maybe a little bit of more rust that I want in through here. And then once we get done with this step, we are going to use this big brush for the next step as well. So when you feel like you've got good dimension in here and you've really got the viewer's eye to roll with these hills, then you're going to wash and dry your big brush again, and you are going to get ready for the next step. It's really tough to stop painting. I'm trying, but I'm having fun. So I know that it's a difficult thing to stop, but I'm going to stop right now. Okay, so get ready for your next step with the big brush. Okay, so for the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to finish.
Ciao.
We're gonna finish the cypress trees. I'm going to be using my large brush. The colors that I'm going to be using are predominantly green, but I will also be using a little bit of rust, and I'll probably use a little bit of white. You can certainly alter these and make them a little bit brighter or darker as you see fit. You could use yellow in it or brown, but I'm going to predominantly be using the green. And I know that my shadows are down to the left. My sun is over to the right, so I want my highlight to be over on the right-hand side of these trees. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm using my big brush. I'm going to be using that dotting technique. You do not need to do every single tree, because if you do every single tree, it's going to look like a whole bunch of stripes. So what I want to do is I just want to focus in on a couple of those front trees. So, and you can make them whichever ones that you want. So I'm going to pretend like this is one of my front trees here. So I'm taking my green paint and I'm just highlighting the exterior of that particular tree that I've designated to be one of my front trees. You could use a little bit of the rust as well. And the reason why I talked about white is because these colors will get darker as they dry. So if, as you're going about this, if it dries too dark, just add a touch of white to it and it will lighten right up for you. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick another one that I want to be a front one. I'm going to make a little front one down here. So I've just designated that. And if you need to, you can always go into your black and darken up the left side of it. I know that I want this big one over here to be a front one as well. So I'm going to start right up at the top. I'm dotting down the right hand side. And I know that there's that fun one behind it, so I'm not even going to touch that. I'm just going to do the cypress tree in front. And I'm just dotting down that right hand side. You can blend it in a little bit with the black, but don't go crazy. Don't bring it all the way over. I'm going to use green and a little bit of rust and pick out a couple other ones that I want to be my front ones. So I think I want this one to be one of my front ones. And as it comes down here, I'm going to start to bubble it out on that right-hand side. That's where that shape is going to come into play. Maybe I got another little one here. So I've got some good, great variation in through there. Maybe I've got a front one in through here. And I'm seeing as they dry, they are getting really dark. So I'm going to end up using a little bit of white. But first I want to get these just kind of into shape. I want that one to be a back one. I think I want a front one to come here. Maybe just little peaks of some of them back here because they're hidden behind the other ones. And I definitely, now that I'm looking at it, want to touch my brush in the white because I want you to be able to see these trees. I don't want them to be too dark. I'm seeing these beautiful distinctions in these trees, and I want the viewer of my painting to see that same thing. So what I'm doing, you don't have to go straight on white. You can certainly do maybe white with a little bit of the green and a little bit of the rust, but you definitely want to make sure that whatever you're trying to convey, people can actually see. So I've got one over here that I'm digging. I want to make sure that people see that. So I'm going to add that little combination of white. I want some brightness up and through here. And then you don't want to forget those little tiny ones that you have over here. So once I think I want to get a little bit more body in these front ones just so you can really see them. But I definitely can feel that they're all tall. Maybe a couple short ones coming down here just to fill in some of these bottom gaps, because I'm seeing some trees go all the way to the bottom. So just filling in some of those gaps so it looks a little bit fuller down below and it's not all just sticks coming down. And then I have these two, so I'm going to do the same combination, green, rust, maybe a touch of white. And they're very small, so you could use a smaller brush, but I'm just going to kind of dot them just to give the illusion that they've got that highlight over on that right side. And then we have that last little step left, which, is going to be the shadows. But I just want to make sure that I've got as much in through here as I want. Again, I'm just kind of dotting it. You could go up with it if you wanted to, but I'm just kind of dotting. I'm going to step back for a second, make sure I've got them full enough. If you don't feel like they're full enough, just brighten them up a little bit. And that will lead the viewer. You could put a little bit of yellow in it if you wanted to. I just added a touch of yellow. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow at the top of a couple of them. This is going to show them a little bit brighter. Dull it down just a little bit. Okay, and then again, the next step we're going to be doing is going to be the shadows down below, and that's going to be done with this big brush. So when you're all set with this, you're going to take this big brush, wash it and dry it, and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the large brush, the 1-inch brush. We're going to be creating the shadows underneath the trees that roll right into the hill. The colors that I'm going to be using are black and brown, and I'm going to be using very little paint. If you run into trouble, you can always bring back some green or some of the other ground colors, but I'm going to be using just a touch of brown and just a touch of black, and I will be wiping it off on the side of my palette. I can always add more. It's really tough to take away once it's on there. And I'm watching what's happening to my hills. So I see that behind my cypress trees, to make them look a little bit flatter, I'm gonna just kind of put my shadow going across, because I see that back there. And then what I'm going to do is I see it coming down, and then it rolls up this hill. So I have very little paint on my brush right now, and that allows me to just kind of almost rub it onto the canvas. So I can always, again, make it darker if I have to, but I'm definitely watching how those shadows are laid out, because that tells a story about the shape of that hill. And then, so this one's coming up somewhere like that, and this again tells a really big story about this hill. So if you need it to be darker, add a little bit more black to it. Leave some spaces between to show that the sun is beaming through some of those trees. And then what happens is it scoops right down the front of this hill. So I'm going to pick a couple in through here that I'm going to start those shadows under. And I see it coming right down this hill and just kind of scooping right almost behind this one. And you can bring it down a little bit further if you want to. We're getting a pretty good glare from the sun right now on the painting. But this is definitely a nice fun painting that you can use your own interpretation, but I'm kind of trying to follow what I'm seeing out there. And let me just kind of, step back here so I can feel that they're going up that hill as they should. That flattened out kind of the top of this, which I wanted it to. You could certainly add more highlight over on here if you wanted to make that a little bit brighter. But you could add clouds if you wanted to. But I like the simplicity of this, so I think I'm going to call it. But you do have one more final step, which you do on every single painting, and it's going to be with the small brush. So when you're all set with that shadow, put the big brush away, get out your small brush, and get ready for the last step. Okay, so the last step of any great painting is to sign it. So, you know, it's funny. I just noticed those two people up there. They look like a cypress tree. I'm like, oh no, I just missed a cypress tree, but they're just people, so pay no attention to them. So I'm going to use my small brush. I'm going to use black paint. I'm going to sign it in the bottom right corner. You could sign it bottom right, bottom left. It's all up to you. And that is going to do it for my painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you love your painting, and I look forward to painting with you again.